Greetings and welcome back to another Perspective. Today I am pleased to be joined by a very unique and special guest, somebody who is in a very interesting position in the United Kingdom, and somebody who's going to talk about a very difficult position, that is being, to use the phrase, the based brown man in a country and from a cultural background that tends to create problems. So I am joined today by Clickbait. He's going to tell us, among other things, about what it's like being ethnically South Asian and from a Muslim background without actually attaching much importance to those things, and in fact, during the course of his life, living outside of that cultural milieu, and how he's navigated that and what his views are as relates to many of the political discussions and conflicts of the day. So thank you very much for joining me, Clickbait. I think the very first discussion we had was precisely about this. So maybe the first question I could ask you is why it is you don't feel much kinship with your fellow South Asians and at least ancestrally speaking Muslims.
Okay, well, yeah, thanks for the introduction. That's very flattering. There's right, I mean, there's one thing that's actually incorrect there.
Okay.
Up to about the age of, I'd say, 12, apart from officials, like, school teachers, doctors, whatever, I was actually fully embedded into Bengali culture. Like, I hardly ever met any white people, and really didn't know anything about them. May
I ask a question? Was that because your parents shielded you or kept you away, or?
No. I mean, I think a lot of Bengali parents do that, and especially if they're Bengali Muslim. Initially, back then, it wasn't out of animosity or anything. It was more wanting to make sure that the traditional culture and language is preserved in their kids, right? Whereas nowadays the tone is a bit different. So, and also like all of the, my friends I'd go and play with would be Bengali because the entire area is Bengali Muslim. And then the primary school, within its catchment area, almost everyone, in fact, in my primary school, everyone was Bengali, right? So just by the circumstances, how it played out. I mean, so in secondary school, again, given the catchment area of the school, it was 99% Bengali Muslim. And then, round about 12 or so, I had probably deal with the Islam thing first. Round about 8, I always say it in this funny way. Obviously, there were many factors. Round about 8, I'd heard the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, and I thought, oh, that's a folk tale about an angry giant in the sky. And then shortly after that, my dad was trying to tutor me in Islam, and I kind of chuckled. I said, oh, another angry giant in the sky. And it just, it just immediately falls into mythological territory. So I never really took it as anything other than just stories. So then in school, secondary school, around 12, I used to get into religious debates just over lunchtime with the other kids who were all Bengali Muslim. They used to get really angry with me and used to say, really quite unkind things about Christians and white people. And I thought, could any of that be right? Because it just doesn't sound plausible. So outside of school, I made a point of making friends with Christians and white people. And overall, my conclusion was that, the Christians are nicer than than these kind of irate Muslims. And white people, the problem with Bengalis is that they don't understand British culture, or at least they didn't at that stage. So I think that's just based on stories they've told each other about white people rather than what white people are actually like. So yeah, I mean, I just thought it's all a bit silly. So I had my friends at school, and then outside of school, I had my non-Bengali Muslim friends that I spent time with, which were probably something like 80% white working class, 20% black working class. Hardly any. I mean, outside of school, the only Bengali Muslim people I really spent time with were people who were related to. Go ahead.
And during this time, did people ever, because you didn't have much contact, as you're pointing out, active contact, friend circles of friendship, etc., with people of your own background, is there some equivalent of an Uncle Tom or a self-hating ex fill in the blank that they would apply to you, and then would that make it would that create difficulty, or did you never hear things like that?
Well, no, I don't think so. I mean, at that time, there were it wasn't there were racial tensions between the Bengali kids, the white kids, and the black kids. So that for me and my circle of social friends rather than school friends, it was kind of quite unusual to have a bunch of white kids and a bunch of black kids and one Bengali kid. And even within that group, there were kind of occasionally racial tension. Like one person gets angry with another, usually a racial slur. But as for from the Bengali people, to me, no, not really. I mean, and I think a lot of that is to do with it was pretty. I mean, I kind of suppose sort of headed up the class almost. There isn't like any official position or anything, but I was pretty without kind of bragging or anything. I was pretty articulate for a 12-year-old. So whenever a teacher would deal unfairly with one of my classmates, whether I liked that classmate or not, I'd actually mouth off to the teacher, not swearing or anything, but actually applying a kind of principle. So yeah, because I stood up for them when I thought the teachers were being dicks, they kind of appreciated me, and I'd get detention all the time, but then people who'd done much less would have been suspended, but they couldn't do that really because they wanted me to produce the grades at the end so their statistics looked good, and I kind of knew that, so I knew I could take the piss.
Yeah. So you never experienced. I mean, there were maybe you could talk a little bit about that, but there definitely were quote unquote ethnic tensions, but you were never the centerpiece of some conflict because you did not ally yourself with your fellow South Asians.
No, not with me at the centerpiece. No, there's and I put it down to this. It's because it was very obvious from even age 8 that I didn't really put much stock in either Islam or Bengali ethnicity. That I don't know. Everyone pretty much considered me a lost cause, so just learned to live with it. Whereas had I let's say, I don't know, reached the age of 16 and then had a change of heart, I wouldn't have been seen as a lost cause, but someone who can be bullied into returning to the fold, if you like.
Or an active traitor, for that matter.
Yeah, or a traitor, yeah. I mean, one of the things that, I think I've said this to you before, is from the pictures I see of Bangladesh, there's some really beautiful landscape, and I'd really like to see it, because in the end I was born there. However, if I went to Bangladesh visiting by myself, then yeah, I get that the local population would not appreciate at all this brown man coming here who speaks Bengali with a British accent, who has, that doesn't seem to be aware of any details of British Bengali culture, doesn't go to mosque, all of this stuff, yeah, it would not be a pleasant experience. Now, so yeah, I mean, one day I probably will try to visit, but I'd take an entourage of relatives or friends.
Right.
But I wouldn't go alone. I don't think it would be safe at all, because local community would see me as a cultural traitor.
And you've expressed some concerns, based on observations you made about the insularity of the Muslim Asian population, not just sort of looking at the news, but also in your own life. Maybe if you're willing to, maybe you could tell us a little about some of those concerns.
Well, I mean, when I was growing up, it was really a matter of them not being familiar with British culture, or things like Christianity or even other religions. So back then it was easy to think, well, I'm sure it'll sort itself out as kind of people become more familiar with what they're dealing with. But probably from about I think it was in the late 90s when I first heard the word Islamophobia. I thought, give me a break, what the hell is that? But so there's already something going on there, and the Twin Towers going down kind of it cast suspicion on Muslims in the UK, probably for about a month or something, but then the media turned around and said, no, they're all fine, let's not go for Islamophobia. Oh, that word again. But from the Muslim perspective, they kind of became fearful of what the consequences might be for them, even though they're not somehow involved. So they kind of huddled up and, how can I put it? Yeah, they sort of huddled up and became increasingly insular over the following decade and a half. That was... So you have various Muslim preachers actually advocating that Muslims have no contact with non-Muslims, not just white people, not just Christians, but any non-Muslim. And even though my sisters, when they grew up, they were took a very similar attitude. Over the years, they kind of bought into that view. So my nephews really have no contact with other than amongst Muslims. So I kind of worry about that, because come on, they need to know the world they're going to grow up in. Keeping them in a bubble isn't good for them.
How one thing I find puzzling is that how is that even achievable? I mean, you have a country, a big city like the United Kingdom, a big city, and how is it that you can just live in a bubble and not be exposed to the mainstream culture, if indeed British culture is still considered mainstream? But I mean, how does that even happen? Are they?
Okay,
Yeah.
No, sorry.
No, I just find that a very puzzling thing. Maybe you can explain that.
Okay, there's it's a sort of consequence of ghettoization. I suppose it comes from housing policy. That if you have, say, a Bengali family that needs social housing, then council will tend to place them near other Bengali people, because they can share a culture and help each other out and stuff like that. Same thing with Polish people or Russian. I remember once seeing one of the mainstream newspapers, a big broadsheet somewhere around 2003, where they drew a massive map of London and highlighted, yes, this is a Russian area, this is a Polish area, this is a Southeast Asian area, this is a Caribbean area, but by ethnic groups of various but bubbles of Jewish quarters and Chinese quarters. All of these things are in all kinds of cities. But yeah, London is a bit more so like that than I don't know, other places, I guess. So yeah, in the instance of how I grew up, there's my family, they're Bengali. The kids at my primary school, because within the catchment area, they're Bengali. Kids at my secondary school, within the catchment area, they're Bengali. If I just pop out to the local park and just kind of make friends and play, run around with the local kids, they're all Bengali. So other than on TV, you don't see non-Bengali people. Also, if you dash down to a local shop, they're all run by Bengali people. Not all of them, many of them. Yeah, especially the small sweet shops that kids might go to.
So it's literally a kind of cultural bubble within the greater, much larger bubble. There's no need for them because all the things they need, the utilities, the amenities, etc., they're all just there, and everyone's Bengali and everyone's Muslim. Now, what about one thing I've heard? I don't know if you can confirm this, is that in some of these South Asian ghettos, for lack of a better description, that it's not uncommon that some of them barely speak English, or at least are not very competent. Is that true?
That is true. I mean, we've talked about my mum before. My mum, she knew only a handful of words, and over the years, I have made various efforts to, make it possible for her to interact with or at least even just understand what's happening on television. But beyond a handful of words, she never quite grasped it. But part of that's her age, of course. Like, the older you get, the harder it gets to learn foreign languages. My dad, his English was really very broken. So even at the age of 8, if he had a medical issue and he didn't quite understand what a doctor was trying to advise him, or he was getting some legal advice from about some issue with the council, didn't understand what the legal advisor was saying, he dragged me along to help clarify what he wants to say, what he wants to ask, and also what the person is trying to tell him. So, yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, a lot of it. I think I was pretty lucky with my dad, because where a lot of Bengali fathers would be quite annoyed with a son who was, not sufficiently, basically excessively anglicized. He was actually quite proud of that, because he was from a generation that really admired the British Empire, and when the whole India breaking away from India gaining independence, he didn't want that, and he wanted to stay part of Britain, and with India breaking up into India, Pakistan, and East Pakistan, later Bangladesh, he didn't want that either. So he was actually both very friendly with Christians and Hindus. Whenever what are they called? People who knock on your door and try to send you God.
Mormons?
No, not Mormons. Just the more general term. Preachers of various kinds.
Right.
Yeah. So he'd always spend hours chatting with them about our differences and similarity between Islam and Christianity and Hinduism, whatever. And of course, they thought they were making progress with him. Like, oh yeah, he's going to become one of us. And actually, he was just generally interested, rather than, he didn't want to join them. He wanted to stay happily Muslim, but he was genuinely interested about similarities and differences. And so, he didn't mind at all that I was very anglicized.
Hmm.
Maybe some of my more distant relatives, they were a bit disappointed, but my dad certainly wasn't.
Now, all of this is painting a picture of somebody who is highly anomalous compared to most people with your background. What type, I mean, later on in life, I think you
Mm.
mentioned this, there were actual conflicts of interest that manifested themselves where you had to sort of de facto make a decision to go with your own conscience or your own set of beliefs
Hmm.
versus expectations that would otherwise have been put on you and assumed that you had to behave in X way. Maybe you could share that story.
Which, oh, I see. Yeah, I mean, early on when okay, so let's say uh, after a point of say after the Twin Towers, then the kind of general suspicion of Muslims in the UK. And I had friends who were police officers, and they were what is it called, counter-terrorism people, and we'd go out for a beer and have a chat about all kinds of things. And when it comes to that kind of topic, one of the questions that came to mind after a while was, what would happen if, let's say, the UK collapsed into civil war, Muslim against non-Muslim,
Hmm.
something like that, right? I mean, my natural inclination is to side with the British people because I want Britain to stay British, right? Just certainly don't want, I don't know, Sharia law or a caliphate or anything like that. That it would just completely ruin everything as far as I'm concerned. There's but then at the same time, there's the family ties. Like that would pit me against my own family, and I have no particular affection for um, Bengali ethnicity or Islam. I do have for my own family. So yeah, it was a tricky one. Early on, I thought, okay, when it comes to civil war, you've got institutions have essentially collapsed, and really the primary loyalties need to go to everyone's needs to really go to their own family to rely on stability and predictability and maybe some sort of peace eventually. And yeah, I mean that was my earliest attempt at sort of trying to figure out how I would go. But then over time, like I said, um, yeah, I have told you like my brothers and sisters have lent further and further down a sort of quite yeah an unacceptable variety or perspective on Islam, and I kind of think, you know what? No, I'm not. I'd much rather, I would protect them personally, but their ideas are just completely off the wall, and I side with the British institution.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would. I mean, some people. I can't remember. There was this. Um, I think it was this American guy we were chatting with on Discord, and he was very skeptical that I would actually do that. But no, early on, yeah, he would have been right to kind of be skeptical. But no, I think the more and more we see conflicts and mismatches of culture and also abuses of, just being able to uh, call any critic of Islam a racist and get away with it and get away with like truly horrendous crimes. No, I'm not playing ball. I don't want to defend any of that. In fact, I want to, make sure that laws are applied even-handedly, irrespective of race, creed, or color, or religion,
Why do you
whatever.
personally feel apparently so attached to British culture? Because uh, some people would argue that this is not my view necessarily, obviously, but say somebody
Mm.
from the alt-right would say, well, it doesn't matter, you're not British, whatever, whatever, that it's not possible for you to feel attached to it. So what do you think what is it about British culture, other than you having grown up in it? Because because here's the tricky thing is, as you pointed out, basically, people can grow up in a culture, quote unquote, and not really feel the attachment, as would be the case with your, I guess, ethnic kinsmen. But in your case, you actually, what is it about British culture that attracts you, would you say, more than South Asian Muslim culture?
Probably, I don't know. I mean, okay, so from very early age, I was very interested in science and mathematics, technology, and yeah, just being aware of the history of how basically things like the Enlightenment and the contributions British and Scottish philosophers have made to developing political ideas and ethical ideas and so on, how that's shaped the particular kind of legal attitude and notions of fairness. I see all of that like something very valuable there that's actually only a few hundred years old, right? So that needs to be preserved because we could lose it very easily. Yeah, we could. Actually, I mean, it's the same. I want Britain to stay British in its philosophy because I think, frankly, it's a better philosophy than Islamic philosophy.
Hmm. So it's basically you just see it
the same way that. Sorry, in the same way that I actually think of the two British political attitudes. Well, not political attitudes. More yes, probably more like ethical attitudes. British ethical attitudes aren't as good as American ethical attitudes. Like they have a stronger emphasis on freedom and equality and stuff like that. It doesn't always play out that way in the political arena, but I'd say they've got a stronger hold or grasp of key ideas of basically being decent to each other. But Britain has its own history, and they're going to it should be preserved just because it's a kind of traditional value. It's also a moral value. It's and it's something I like. It's what I'm comfortable in. If I wanted to live in under Sharia law or something like that, I could just move to a country that follows that approach. So I don't see why homogenizing people is going to be particularly helpful.
I mean, this is a pretty basic question, but I often wonder these people who come to Europe and want to inject their own views that tend to be quite distant from the native culture. If they're so infatuated with Sharia or the culture or the cuisine or what have you, why don't they just live in the countries where that is the majority and has better representation? Why live in the cold, misty land of Britain where that's not the case, or Germany, or anywhere really in Europe? If you could be amongst your kinsmen, or religiously you're co-religionists if you go to Saudi Arabia, Sharia law, whatever. I mean, that these opportunities exist, yet for some reason they still want to live in what is still, at least tentatively, a Eurocentric culture and European countries. I find that a bit puzzling because I've traveled a lot. I've lived in many different places. I never thought that if there was some culture that I wanted to move someplace and then bring my own culture, whatever that might be, over there to live in a kind of cultural bubble or something. It doesn't really make any sense to me. I wonder what your own views on that are.
Okay, so I think first there's two parts to that. Why they move, and the second part is why once they've moved they want their original culture, the culture they've left, to gain some sort of primacy. Okay, so why they move? The main reasons I'd say is either they're, I mean, they might value, say, Sharia law or something like that, but there's one particular or several particular threats to their safety or something, or their family, that they're fleeing. The other reason, and much more common reason, is the economic opportunity. That it's like most, like for example, my dad. He moved from Bangladesh to the UK. What year? But with the intention of working for 5 years or so, and then going back. And the object there is to, do low paid work, but the money you reduce the exchange rate. It's actually a pretty handsome sum in Bangladesh. So it's that economics and the exchange rate, and also quality of living for a brief while. I mean, there used to be a myth in Bangladesh that the streets of London are paved in gold, and so and people literally believe that. So stuff like that. And then why do they then want to import that foreign culture? For a lot of these people, they struggled to actually find work or raise enough money within their little 5-year plan. And like my dad did, he was involved in a handful of industrial accidents that meant he wasn't able to work for a period, and then went back involved in another accident, so on. And eventually he'd been here so long that it would be impractical for him to move back. So what he did is he wrote to my mum and said, you're going to come here and live with me and bring the kids. I think who was alive born at that time was my older sister and me. We were the only people born. Right. So then now the family's settled. Kids going to a British school, so standard of schooling is much better as well. Standard of healthcare much better. Even if you're so you're sending part of your money back to Bangladesh, but then you can eke out a reasonable living, even with a lowly paid work in the UK. At least you could back then. Nowadays, it's actually even harder to keep things viable on low incomes. But so you just sort of slide into it, and after a while, though. And I've noticed this with not just Bengalis, but with Polish people, with Saudi Arabian people, with basically pretty much every kind of immigrant group you could think of, because London's like that. They if they're out of touch with the culture that they're most familiar with, they go through this sort of strange depression almost, like they feel really, really lonely. They could be surrounded by lots and lots of people, and be the life and soul of the party at a local pub and everything, but actually every time they pause you can see this kind of sadness come across their face. They're feeling lonely despite being surrounded by lots of people. And I mean, what actually, I don't know, I doubt there's any kind of scientific verification for this, but one of the things, like I grew up on Southeast Asian food, and roughly once a month, I have to have a hot lamb curry, otherwise my mood just drops, and it's a sort of nostalgia, which kind of that needs to get satisfied. And I mentioned this to an Australian friend, and he said, you know what, that's exactly the same with me and steak. Every month he has to have a massive steak, otherwise he starts feeling a bit depressed or lonely. Or they don't. The Australians, another group of people that love to hang out with each other because it reminds them of home or what culture they grew up in.
To be
So there's
fair,
that.
I've seen that in my travels. I was always the odd man out because I'm not fond of the United States or being American sort of de facto. But when I was abroad in various places, I would certainly notice other people who were quote unquote Americans spending time with each other, shunning the local population, etc., etc. From a
Yeah.
personal perspective, I can't really relate to it. But then again, I'm a terrible American in almost every respect. So it's to me, it's personally, it's very difficult to envision how that might go. But I certainly sort of intellectually can comprehend it. If people
Yeah.
have some kind of tie to a culture, at some point in time, it feels too alien to not. I mean, I suppose maybe, just maybe, if I went way too long, not extremely, without eating German food, just because I've lived in Germany for a fairly long
Hmm.
time, I might, not that I eat it often because it's quite heavy, um, I might have that feeling. I certainly get annoyed if I go for a long time not speaking German. That does bother me. But I'm not sure if that's a cultural attachment or my unwillingness for my German to get rusty to the point of oblivion. So it's kind of, I'm not really sure, but I certainly can intellectually comprehend that. But
I mean, it's but
mm.
oh God.
No, the only difference I think is that it there's a kind of hypocrisy there in the South Asian description that you've given, that a lot of them are coming over essentially. I mean, the impolite way of putting it is for the Gibbs, right? But let's just say the better
Sorry, I don't
standard,
know what is Gibbs. You mean the boons? Uh,
yeah, benefits and,
mm,
and things like that. Or we could just say a better standard of living that includes
yeah,
Gibbs and benefits.
yeah,
But they have no desire to attach themselves in any way to the culture, which has, for better or worse, given rise or given birth to this state of society, which is de facto a better place to live than their countries of origin. And to me,
yeah,
that's an actual. It's a kind of oxymoron, one, and two, a kind of intellectual dichotomy or cognitive dichotomy that people are not really willing to resolve within their own minds. How can you say that you're not interested in the culture but think it's a better place to live in that culture? You see what I mean?
yeah, yeah. I do. It's I mean the well, at least in my dad's generation, the I can say that the intention, or overwhelmingly the intention was for that to be a temporary arrangement that just didn't pan out for a lot of people, and they found themselves having to stay longer for various reasons. Um, the and then eventually, it's been so long that it would be too much of an upheaval to return. Um, the but yeah, I think in more modern times the motives are a bit different. It's uh, they they seem to, yeah, they want the highest standard of living, but they disdain British culture as inferior, as in not Muslim enough, or not whatever enough. Um, and yeah, it's tricky. I mean, you get the same with, or not the same, but a similar kind of thing I've noticed amongst African immigrants to the UK is they Africans tend to be very much more religious than British people, and so they view the UK isn't quite secular, isn't quite religious. It's sort of in the middle somewhere. Um, but the Africans, they say, oh well, that's the Church of England, so UK is a Christian country, and they want Christianity imposed on the population. Some of them do, and it's like, no, you kind of misunderstood what's going on here. It isn't quite that, but yeah, there you go. I think, yeah, yeah, the Africans do tend to, or at least the Christian Africans do tend to look down on British culture as being a sort of lapsed Christian culture, rather than the way I look at it, which is a secularized Christian culture. I mean, certainly Christianity is important to a certain degree in social and political arena, but it would really not go down well. I mean, for example, if a politician starts talking too much about Jesus or religion in general, they're not going to get voted in. Yeah, because the British people just don't like that stuff. Whereas the see, people like Sadiq Khan, he can talk about Islam all day because his constituency love that stuff, and will, even without even looking at any of his policies or track record, say, yeah, that's the guy we want.
Would you say it's accurate that he got in just because of the sheer numbers of South Asian Muslims in London?
It isn't. Yes, but firstly that. Secondly, you do have. This really annoys me. Is you do have a very large number of quisling white middle class British people, who really do. I mean, it's astonishing to me, but they really do think any criticism of Islam is Islamophobia, it's racism, and these brown people need our extra protection and stuff like that. Otherwise, you're a bigot. But when you you go to their Facebook profile or you check their social circles some way, not a single non-white person on anywhere to be found, right? So they're speculating on something they have no acquaintance with. So they're not in a position to really be able to say whether or not the criticism is valid or not. So I mean, we were talking about just earlier today, I think, about losing Facebook friends, right? One particular girl, she was of this type, right? So we get into an argument about whether it's proper to criticize Islam or not, and she thought, I'm just some crazy racist, and I said to her, no, this is what I grew up with, this is what I'm familiar with, so I do know what I'm talking about. And she goes, no, you've just got a twisted way of looking at it. And I said, okay, and I thought, let's have a look at her list of friends, and I just scanned over all of her 300, 400 Facebook friends. And I said, other than me, why don't you have any non-white friends? And of course, she didn't like that question at all and blocked me. But yeah, you see what I mean? It's like I do think it's really frustrating. Now, that's the group of people that I find most irritating. That white middle class lefty people who supposedly often claim to be standing up for the little man, the working class, and the ethnic minorities and stuff like that. Well, they don't know any ethnic minorities, and whenever the white working class try to draw attention to some social issues, no, they're just ignorant working class racists, and this is I mean, they're just so disconnected. It really annoys me.
Yeah, I mean it's to me it seems to sort of virtue signaling in order to gain social cachet with their fellow, there's a term, champagne liberals. Some people use that term.
Champagne. I prefer to say champagne socialists.
Sorry, my bad. Yes, champagne socialists. And it doesn't really. It's just so they can look good, or I don't really understand the at least in a deeper sense, the point from a personal perspective, virtue signaling, because maybe because I'm a loner, and so I'm not trying to get in with some group, but still, it's interesting how, to me, and somewhat incomprehensible that somebody would just go through this motions to show they're a quote unquote good person, quote unquote doing the right thing. It makes no sense to me, at least.
Well, I think when it comes to public figures and celebrities, that's exactly correct. It is virtue signal. But when you talk to regular white middle class people. They genuinely believe it because they read it in the newspapers. All of their friends believe it, and they have no practical encounter in their day-to-day lives that would contradict it. So why? I mean, I've actually had people say that to me. It's like, yeah, but when I've tried to correct their perspective and say, no, seriously, make some white working class friends, make some Muslim friends, make these friends, and you'll find out yourself. And they go, yeah, I could do all of that, but I mean, why should I believe you when actually everyone, and whenever anyone says everyone, they mean everyone that matters to me. Everyone that matters to me already believes it. So why are they all wrong but you're right? So, well, because they're all like you. They don't have any white working class friends. They have the same contempt for white working class people as you do. They don't have any black friends, or maybe they'll have one black friend. They might have one Asian friend. That's me, and and that's the bubble they live in. And their family obligations and their work and other commitments keep them busy. It would actually require a conspicuous effort on their part to really dig a bit deeper. I mean, I suppose I've been able to, I don't know, if you want to be a bit grand about it, investigate things that have made me a bit curious, precisely because I'm not married, I don't have any children, and I actually, every time someone's a bit different or unusual, I always want to talk to them and find out more about them. And I enjoy debating and kind of arguing about things. So, I suppose that's one of the reasons. Like I used to be very sort of like an obnoxious atheist, like during the YouTube atheist days. But again, my instinct to just be curious about people who are different from me meant that I actually got along. Took creationists seriously, and found that despite disagreeing about the kind of cosmology and stuff, that they were pretty decent people, and some of them weren't sincere conversationalists, but others were genuinely, seriously, dude, science does support creationism. I mean, it really does. They really believe it. But okay, in the end, as long as they're not bad people, all I can really do is shrug. And if I berate them for believing something stupid, then that's me being the asshole, not them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, now projecting onto the grander scale of things in the United Kingdom, because a lot of this is personal, and I think we have a good picture of, at this stage, of where you're coming from. The things seem to be a mess. I mean, Brexit, I haven't really been keeping up, to be honest. It doesn't seem like it's going to go through the original vote casting. I don't know. And
yeah, I haven't kept up with it.
Yeah, there seem to be many divisions on the ground. I mean,
yeah.
let's briefly talk about Rotherham, for example, because I think it's reflective of the bigger picture. You know what happened in Rotherham, right?
Yeah.
An absolute scandal, and I think most people would agree a complete moral failure too.
Yeah, I mean, but the worst part of it is that the institutions that are supposedly there to protect these those girls, they effectively colluded with the Red Gang, didn't they?
In not being honest about what's happening. I mean, there were people that were aware. I guess we should. I don't know if everyone knows. So maybe you could tell the audience, because I'm going to assume that not everyone knows about what happened in Rotherham. Would you mind?
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I can. It's not something I've thought about recently, so I may not be too clear on it. So let's see. Let's try to remember. Basically for decades, they. I think it was mainly the Pakistani and Bengali Muslim gangs were basically grooming schoolgirls into kind of grooming and blackmailing schoolgirls into white, not just white schoolgirls, but also Hindu schoolgirls and Sikh schoolgirls, basically non-Muslim schoolgirls, into serving as prostitutes. Get them hooked on drugs so that they'll keep coming back. They're hooked, and so the clients were primarily the nighttime industry, so cab drivers and restaurant workers and stuff like that. The venues were usually cab offices and back rooms of or basements of restaurants, occasionally shops, and exactly the accusation that I can't remember what her name was. The accusation that was levelled against Brett Kavanaugh, basically having some stoned girl at the end and then a line of guys basically taking their turn with her. That's what you're. And whenever the families of these girls were found out about it, tried to go to the police and all of that. The police and social workers and all of these people would say, "Well, she's just made a lifestyle choice. That's outrageous." Yeah, and in fact, they do things like if I don't remember the exact details of this case, but there was an instance or several instances of father trying to go to one of these dens and take his daughter back, and fight ensued. Police arrive, and the police arrest the dad. Right, and that's mad. Yeah, but I think the best person for getting, I mean, this for your audience. I think most of them probably are aware of Majid Nawaz, but his take on it, I think, is the most lucid, most instructive. Because I feel very much the same way as him. One of the things that makes me really angry about that kind of stuff is the same thing that angers him. He's a Pakistani Muslim. I might not be Muslim, but I am Bengali with Islamic heritage. These are my people. What the fuck are they doing? And Majid Nawaz I give him enormous kudos for sticking his neck out and saying, these are my people. We should be condemning them rather than pretending nothing is going on. Yeah, and even now, it's still going on now, even after the scandal broke, to some degree. But bit by bit, I think progress is being made because enough people have been alerted. Enough of the public have been alerted to the fact.
And I also think that in light of what happened to Rotherham, this went on for years, the cover-up and these...
Yeah, and it wasn't just Rotherham. At first, the story was that it's just Rotherham, but steadily it became apparent, no, that's been going on across towns all over the UK. And in fact, you might have a girl getting driven up to Birmingham, and being used there, and then being driven back and dropped off at her parents. It's a proper network or network industry.
Yeah, but I mean, the one thing I wanted to note is that for all the cries of omnipresent racism, the fact that the mainstream was complicit, largely white English people complicit, and also it took for them forever to report. I mean, I mean, where's the racism when you have incidents like that? It's almost the opposite, right? I mean, they're so terrified of supposedly being called racist that they wouldn't even effectively report a crime and stop a crime.
Not just a crime, but
many crimes.
Many crimes. Yeah, I mean, it's like the British institutions are they're basically terrified of getting bad press. It is but primarily the press I think are to blame for it. Now, obviously, the police and the politicians, they have a certain duty, but in practice, the main thing they're looking for is votes and public confidence, and that's it. Yeah, and yeah, the press are out of control. These are precisely that category of white middle class people who are completely disconnected from what actually goes on. So each one of them covers up one little bit, right? But because it doesn't, they don't want to stoke Islamophobia or anything like that, because that's racism, right? And if the police or the or politician or some other public figure steps out of line, then yes, they want to virtue signal to their colleagues and seriously take down this person who's bringing forward some critical information to the public. And yeah, I mean, in the end, you have to think about if you're a police officer and you've got your family to look after, you've got your career to advance and everything. It's actually. But I mentioned earlier that I have police officer friends. Now, they, in hushed tones, things they could never say to their senior officers, to the people in charge, the middle management, the Metropolitan Police. They, after a few beers, and they'll say in hushed tones how much they resent the kinds of things that they're ordered not to investigate. They're ordered to, leave it to me. I'll deal with it, and then nothing happens, even though they think this is really important to be done. And it's not just in the case of those particular kinds of crimes, but there seem to be a whole variety of crimes that the police management just don't want to deal with for sort of political reasons or public relations reasons, because they don't want the media going for them, and then their careers damaged, all of that stuff. That seriously compromises their ability to provide for their family or provide for themselves. So yeah, people are in a bind. But one of the most flexible part are the media. They're most able to deviate from the script, if you like, and yet they don't. So therefore, I hold them most responsible.
Yeah, but I mean, they are most likely to deviate from a script, but the script, culturally speaking, is predetermined. I mean, they're not. What's the likelihood that they're actually going to deviate from that? It seems very, very unlikely.
No, it seems unlikely for the
Well, I mean, what is the current year's cultural current? It's the basically far left attitude. It's strongly quote unquote multicultural, whatever that means.
Sorry, what cultural?
Multicultural.
Oh, multicultural.
Quote unquote multicultural. Strongly, everybody's identical. There are no differences between people. Any difference that does exist must be due to oppression or institutional obstacles or something like that. And that is the mainstream throughout the West, despite very little evidence to actually support that position. It doesn't need to be because it's an ideology. So people that try to break away from that I mean, for example, I'll try to tie this in. Do you know Tucker Carlson, the American
Yeah,
pundit?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So he made some comments a few times about demographic changes and how people feel scared by that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's a kind of harmless statement, I think. And it's natural if things are rapidly changing in your environment to feel uncomfortable, maybe at the
Yes.
very least. Of course, he's cited as a racist for saying that, and understandably, because that's the climate we live in, because that kind of thing is quote unquote racist. And even citing numbers such as taking everybody from the world won't necessarily make you richer. Saying something like that, it's a very obvious statement. So that's about as far as you can get to speaking any sort of truth to power, making any kind of reasonable statement in the mainstream. And even he gets grilled, although unlikely to be fired for that. And I don't know. I mean, I'm curious, given that you're, British, brown, and Bengali, where you see this going in the next 10 or 20 years. I really think this is a kind of game over situation. I don't think things will be improving anytime soon. Sargon,
No.
I know you're a fan of Sargon. I'm not quite, but Sargon's always talking about sort of the culture war and how he's winning, or I don't know, his side is winning. But in terms of actual impact and what we see at the highest levels of society, academia, and all that, there aren't many changes. It's the same. It's the same. At the very least, the same old, or it's getting worse in some cases. And while somebody like Sargon might hail some victories on YouTube or the internet or some debate that might help line his own pockets, that's not changing the trajectory of Britain or the West more generally. I guess I'm very pessimistic, but I just look around anywhere really, whether it's Germany, the Netherlands, and things are not improving. I mean, for example, I was talking with a German colleague the other day about a very, I don't know how it's in the UK, but in Germany and some other countries, there's generally a kind of almost obligatory language instruction. If you come here, you have to learn the language, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no penalty for not complying, really. I mean, you can still get benefits and gibs. And interestingly enough, a few years back, Denmark changed some of the social welfare policies that included, not attending language courses on time or completing them, or basically being in compliance with what asylum seekers are supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them got up and left for the UK. But any discussion like that, because there's some restriction there, because there's some degree of strictness to begin with at all, is deemed as, well, you name it, racist or prejudiced or what have you. So if you just say in Germany, okay, you can stay here, but you have to integrate, you're going to take these language classes, you have to pass certain tests. If you don't pass the first time, it's not the end of the world, you can try again, and say a 3 strikes out policy. And then, if you can't do that, you have to go back. That's viewed as draconian. I mean, that proposal would be rather viewed as draconian. And I just...
Well, I mean, sorry, you put a lot there, so...
Yeah, sure, please do.
Remind me if I miss out anything. Okay, so dealing with... Start with the Sargon point. Like, basically, he doesn't seem to be having much in the way of meaningful impact, apart from minor victories here and there. The way I think about it is he's just one public figure. You have to look at not just Sargon, but you need to look at Sargon, Tommy Robinson, Nigel Farage, UKIP, public reaction, international reaction to say Tommy Robinson's getting imprisoned for basically reporting, and when you take all of those things together, but also Brexit as well, and when you take all of those things together, you see that I think progress is being made, but it's slow, and it comes with a great deal of resistance, because out of these things, everyone has egg on their face. Yeah, all of the regular institutions and the things we're supposed to trust, society, the people whose hands we're supposed to trust the welfare of society to, have been very regularly failing, and for a long time. So they don't want it to get out, and they certainly don't want to lose power or influence or status. There's going to be always perpetual resistance to anything like that. But that doesn't, I suppose, to sound a bit crass, it ain't over till the fat lady sings. Yeah. I think the only time, and in any case, I think it's also to some degree, to in a very important sense, a civic duty to. This is one of the things I like about the American attitude, is that they do much more than Brits do. See it as a civic duty to hold their politicians and institutions to account for the various things they do. Now, maybe sometimes they don't do it terribly effectively, but there is that attitude there that can be built upon. Brits, in general, it takes quite a lot to wake them from their slumber, because on the surface things just look so peaceful and calm, and especially if the media aren't reporting on key developments, basically doing media blackouts on key events, then it's very easy for them to just think, everything's all right, it will sort itself out. If that was really happening, then the police would have done something. Don't be so stupid that they're actually, turning a blind eye to this or that, or politicians are targeting Tommy Robinson. No, Tommy Robinson's a neo-Nazi. Come on, everyone knows that. Stuff like that. It's but bit by bit, it's getting out, and progress is being made. I don't think it's game over, but you could be right. It could be just a downward spiral. But I don't think that's any excuse to give up.
No. Hold on. I wasn't saying you gotta throw in the towel, give up. GG. No, okay. I wasn't suggesting that.
But in the end, if my perspective that there's slow progress is right, yes, it's going to take a long time to rectify. And when I say long time, I mean decades. Yeah. Although having said that, back in 2010, just before 2010, I'd actually taken a particular interest in Tommy Robinson, and thought, okay, this all looks shady. Let me find out whether Tommy Robinson is actually a neo-Nazi, and then you can go to various sources and let the guy speak for himself and find out what he actually represents and what positions really are. I think, no, this isn't a neo-Nazi. He's a concerned citizen trying to basically get justice for injustices he's seen. He's been branded a neo-Nazi for simply being a good citizen, actually. Right, so amongst my Guardian buddies, at I think it was a Boxing Day dinner or something. Not for Christmas, the Boxing Day dinner at a restaurant, I told them, you know what? Give it 10, 15 years, I reckon Tommy Robinson is going to be considered a great British folk hero. Someone who actually stood up against incredible odds and prevailed. Whether he prevails or not, he'd be greatly admired. And of course, they all laughed at me as in, wow, what an idiot, so off base. Why are you speaking so fondly of neo-Nazi? But hey, look at it. It's 2018, current year, and there's the establishment are resistant to him making any progress and penalise him at every opportunity. But he's more well known and appreciated than ever, right? So in a sense, I was wrong. I said 10, 15 years, whereas actually it's been 5 to 10 years, and he's already highly admired for all the effort he's put in, at great personal risk. So even though I say it's going to be slow progress, it does seem political events unravel slightly faster than I expect them to. So it might be sooner, in fact. But then, just to be cautious, I'll still say maybe another.
Again,
20 years or
I don't disagree fundamentally with any of that. It's just, when you look at the power structures and who's doing what, it just seems that not much has changed, and certainly the internet. There are issues on the internet, YouTube, and that's going to get worse because of this event in Pittsburgh, which everyone's heard of, I'm sure. Because we all know, I think you mentioned, and I agree with you, that they're gonna milk this for every little. They're gonna milk it for every little bit they can to clamp down and become even more authoritarian and what have you.
I don't think that was me, but that does
Was
sound
it
like
not?
something.
I'm pretty sure that the event in Pittsburgh, those who don't know, there was some alt-right guy who didn't care about optics, apparently. He said, screw the optics, I'm going in, and shot up a bunch of Jewish people in a synagogue, I think 11 in total, most of them elderly. That I think that might be used as an excuse to clamp down on the internet and YouTube. Who knows? The LDL, the ADL, which is the I won't.
Well,
they're in cahoots with Google and YouTube anyway. So
right. I mean, I'm not terribly fond of, as you know, not terribly fond of the modern left in either the UK or the US.
No.
But ironically, the godfather of the left, Noam Chomsky, is, I think, one of the most insightful commentators on the political impact of the Twin Towers going down, or even any kind of crisis that.
Well, I mean, you're old enough too. I mean, I think both of us are old enough. I'm a bit older, but we're both old men here to remember. I mean, I'm going to say this almost categorically, but life was better in a general sense before 9/11.
It was. I mean, I mean, something was going on. Like I said, Islamophobia was becoming a word that was a few, very small number of people were trying to promote in 1999. But then the Twin Towers helped accelerate it, because then it went all over the news as a word, so everyone adopted it.
Yeah.
Now, in the 90s, things were a bit, in the UK at least, things were a bit lefty, things were a bit socialist, but nonetheless, things worked, and there wasn't really much to complain about, the conservatives expressing worry and so on about certain things, really didn't seem credible just because life was good.
Yeah.
Whereas, like you say, things have been deteriorating, and in fact, the conservatives were not worried enough, and some things that they should have been worried about, they weren't worried about at all. And in fact, I don't know if you appreciate V. Monroe very much, but I like his the way he refers to Tommy Robinson as the prophet, because this lunatic, undereducated moron made all of these predictions about how things are going to get worse, and they just keep turning out to be true. I think.
Rivers of Blood speech by Enoch Powell. I mean, his projections for immigration and the effects that it might have, they turned out to be worse. And at the time, people, he basically, because of that, and some other things, he basically lost his career in the public, even back then.
So that's what. But I mean, things are much worse now, and that's what politicians, police officers, social workers, journalists. That's what they're scared of. is career damage and the implications for their own life, and
because we see what
knock-on
happens
effects on their family.
even in the '60s when Enoch Powell made that speech. He felt the full wrath of, I guess I could say, public censure. I don't know how I'd put it, but nobody wants to say anything. I mean, I'm curious, you being based in Brown, it's a fact now that London is no longer an English city, at least demographically speaking, right?
Yeah. I mean, that bothers me. I mean, I'm actually, I do want to see Nigel Farage. He does a great radio show on LBC, but lots of people want him back in politics because he's just been so effective and useful. So I don't know if he's really going to go ahead with it or not, or whether he's actually made a final decision. But he has been. I haven't followed him lately, but he has said that he would want to run for London mayor, and I think he'd be a great London mayor.
All right, why not Prime Minister?
Well, no, the British politics doesn't work like that. I mean, you
Right.
basically need the endorsement of a major party. So at the moment, it means either Conservatives or Labour, and neither of them like him.
Wouldn't he, in a
Labour
London...
opposed to his views, and Conservatives are they dislike him because he makes them look bad. Anyways, as much as I like Nigel Farage as a candidate, given the demographic shift, yeah, I'm not sure what his chances are.
They seem slim. I mean,
I know, that's a shame.
But here's the thing. I'm asking this question openly and to you. I mean, you have a kind of armor suit, being brown, being a quote unquote minority, that other people don't have.
That's not actually true. What you find is in the same way that the white middle class lefties love to say we need to do these things for the working class, and as soon as a working class person steps up and says, actually, you know what, that's not really all that important. Here's this other thing that's much more important to us and would help us a lot more, except it's against what the white middle class lefties would prefer to be preoccupied by. So they say, oh no, you're just an ignorant, beer-swilling, and undereducated moron. And
okay, but usually
the point. The same thing applies to ethnic minorities as well. Yeah, you can be, and also gays, right? So I remember reading that 50% of gays actually want to would vote for Conservatives rather than Labour, and Labour threw a hissy fit, and journalists threw a hissy fit about it because who are these morons, these homophobes, and I thought it's funny, but So I'm afraid what you'll find in practice is the Bengali Muslims don't give me any grief because I'm a lost cause to them, right? They don't give me any grief. But the white middle class lefties, oh my God, you wouldn't believe how racist they are. If you're brown, or if you're black, or if you're gay, or if you're a woman, you have to agree with them on all points, or you're an idiot. Yeah, or you're fundamentally evil. No, actually, this is a funny thing. Both in British politics and American politics, the right tend to think that the left are either stupid or misled or gullible, which sounds about right. And whereas the left think all of those same things on the right, but on top of that, and far more importantly, they think the right are fundamentally evil. Yeah, and the moral psychologist Jonathan Haidt has found that in his own research that left-leaning people tend to be more prone to Manichaean thinking, whereby people who disagree with you aren't just making a mistake or just have a different view or opinion. They're actually evil for disagreeing with you. And I quite see that a lot on the left, which it didn't used to be like that. It used to be the other way around, that the righties would be more prone to Manichaean thinking, but not nowadays. Nowadays, the right tend to be, better at listening to conflicting views.
Well, they kind of have to be, but I guess my main question was, I mean, you can get away with answering a question that maybe I couldn't, certainly not someone who's English could. Is it in any way a regrettable thing that London is no longer an English city and probably never will be or anytime soon?
Well, yeah, I mean, but I mean, how old am I? I'm 38, or according to your measures, 39. But
hey, you remember, round up. That's the right thing to do.
So let's see. My dad died at the age of 73. Let's say, for whatever reason, that's how long I lived as well. So that's, what does that give me? That gives me about 35 years. Yeah, I mean, I might, assuming I'm still in London and still alive, I might just in the last 5 years, last 5-10 years of my life, see a correction. But yeah, it's for most of my life, I'm going to either have to put up with the fact that London isn't an English town anymore, or if it becomes unbearable, then I'd have to move to. I don't want to. I've tried living in smaller towns, and I just get bored. I mean, I'd like it. People are nice and everything, but it's just odd things I've become used to. It's like if I run out of milk at 2 a.m., I can just go to the 24-hour shop down the road and just get some milk. Right. Whereas in a small town, everything's closed. I think, what? Why is everything closed? Maybe I want some milk. So it's just these small things that, I'm pretty much a city animal now.
Well, that's fair. Well, and I mean, you can blend in, so.
Yeah.
And I mean, that tells me that in essence, you do on some level agree with the trajectory of things. I'm going to make the observation that things are not going to improve.
Well, there's this very generic. I actually have quite interested in things like con artistry and deception and fraud, especially health fraud, like selling bogus treatments and stuff. And there's this random phrase I have from that interest, which is that like if someone asks me to make a prediction, I don't know, I'm doing it as a sort of mentalism trick, lay out some tarot cards and basically bullshit them. I'll say stuff like things are going to get worse before they get better, but they will get better. Right? It's almost a non-prediction. Yeah. And yeah, you can get away with that quite easily. But I mean, yes, it could be true if that's the case. But it's also a very easy one to get totally wrong, but still appear to be right about.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunate. I guess I'm the eternal pessimist in these matters. I don't really see much hope. I mean, it's...
No, I see is steady. Well, I see in some areas increasing, even accelerated decline. In other areas, steady progress. Steady, slow progress. What I think is ultimately. Well, my hope is that ultimately things correct themselves, but it's going to take a long time, and it's going to take very persistent, patient effort. This is why I admire people like Tommy Robinson, Sargon of Akkad, like V. Monroe. I admire political parties like UKIP and politicians like Nigel Farage. Also, I mean, if you take an American example, someone like Donald Trump, that wasn't his first stab at becoming U.S. president. He failed multiple times. I think it was multiple times before he finally landed it, right? So, and that was actually against his own expectations. He expected to lose. With things like this, Actually, someone, I can't remember who said this, but someone was talking about Thomas Edison recently. And yeah, it was just in a casual conversation with someone online. He said something like, Thomas Edison was being interviewed about the light bulb, right? And the reporter was asking, why did you find it hard to carry on, pursuing this after you'd tried something like 250 times and failed each time? And he said, I didn't fail 250 times. I succeeded 250 times because with each failure, I learned what doesn't work, right? And so he was kind of narrowing down how to make a light bulb more and more. So yeah, I mean that's I suppose that's a bit of a Pollyannish way of looking at it. But point is, if you really want to do something difficult, you need to be persistent. Yeah, and you're going to fail a lot. You might even fail more often than you succeed. But
I mean, on a semi-final note, I would say that it just happens to be the case that initially somebody needs be brave enough to take the hits, the big hits, where they lose their job, their livelihood, and if enough people do it, there's enough momentum, then it becomes less of an issue because it requires less bravery. But right now, going up against the establishment is difficult. I don't know if you know the Distributist, but he made a video recently where sort of effectively commenting on the aftermath of what happened in Pittsburgh and the alt-right. And
I do know the Distributist, but I haven't.
Oh yeah, well, it's a pretty decent video. But the point he makes several points, and I would just make the observation is that one makes progress inches by inches, but regress, retrograde things, it goes miles. So the very fact that this lunatic shot up this synagogue, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever progress has been made in a general sense, in anything that's not officially the left-wing dogma or doctrine, it's been set back already. I mean, who knows what's going to happen exactly, but I mean, this is the problem, is that it's just sort of tiptoeing forward, and then something like this happens, and all the progress is, I wouldn't say reversed, but it's been seriously dampened. But yeah, I think there needs to be enough momentum of people to push things forward rather than just the one odd man out. I mean, Tommy Robinson is a sort of anomaly. This guy,
he really isn't. I mean, that is how he's portrayed. But the thing is, I mean, people in different situations are ready and willing to be brave at different points. This is why kind of mentioned that I said Tommy Robinson would be remembered as a folk hero. You need a kind of spark, and then you need some sort of catalyst, and then as so you some people will be willing to stick their heads out earlier than others. I mean, generally, the more you've got to lose and the more hazardous it is to your friends and your family and yourself, the more cautiously you have to tread. Eventually, the amount of public support for people like Tommy Robinson, Nigel Farage, UKIP, has been steadily growing. There are. Eventually, you're really starting to make winning moves when police officers and social workers and politicians start coming out and deviating from the script, right? That I don't think has really happened to an appreciable degree. I mean, it is quite rare, but eventually, it would reach a point where a politician, let's say, realizes it really doesn't matter what the media say about me, because my constituency will still vote for me because I can see what their concerns are, right? When you reach that point, that's when you're making real progress. But at the moment, it's still kind of how shall I say, subsurface progress. Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, I think you're right to be a little bit pessimistic about it, because it would be great to see big wins splashed all the way across the media, to even have a few major media outlets actually on the side of the public rather than rather than trying to bemuse them. Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. It'll take time.
Well, on that very optimistic note, impressively optimistic note, I will thank my guest for joining me. It's been my pleasure to have you here. Always good to listen to you. And yeah, I don't know if I share his optimism, but I guess we can always wait and see. That's the one thing.
Yeah, I'm not optimistic as such. I just think it's important not to lose heart and appreciate the small successes, and eventually, hopefully, there'll be big successes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's also a view. On the other hand, I mean, I think we'll just keep on trudging along at a steady pace, and continually, things will get worse and worse. But hey, that's just my view. I'm the pessimist, and I might be, of course, could be wrong about that, but we'll see. Everyone, thanks for tuning in, and I'll check you out at a later date if I'm still alive. And as always, may the gods watch over you. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.